Hi. Yeah, it's Monday morning. Yeah, getting my camera crew to adjust things here so that I'm sort of on screen and that sort of stuff. So, what will happen today is a fair amount of painting with aluminum or aluminium, depending on where you are and how you pronounce it, paint. I've got a bunch of parts here that have been, in most cases, like really sorry. I'm looking at this and said I sanded all this down. Why is there a little line there? I not I thought for sure I got that. Okay, what I'm talking about is maybe it's okay. See this line. You can see it. It's a darker line, and that's where I sanded the ridge from the molding process. I sanded it fairly aggressively, but it's still, you can still see it. No, I'm not, but I don't feel it. So I guess I'll paint that part. And if it still shows, then I'll do some more sanding and then reprime it. And that's not going to hurt anything. To look like a piece of plastic with a ridge down, it's supposed to look like a bar of metal. And this sits on top like this. So this is the side that shows, and this side's better. Okay, well, all of these little bits are painted aluminum, as is this. We put a second coat on this, and the inside of the body, there will be a second and maybe a third coat on this to get it to look uniform. And then the inside of the tail cone, this goes on the very back of the car, underneath on the back, covering up all of the engine detail that I carefully sanded and painted and filled and sanded and repainted and everything. Steering wheel, I might start with this. The inside bits there are aluminum, and then the outside is red. So I'll paint the aluminum part, and then there might be some red touch up. And then this is the instrument panel, and that's going to take a lot of work. I might save that until Wednesday, depending on how the rest of this goes. And you say, well, why are there toothpicks in these things? Well, that's to hold them. And I can put a clip on there, stick it there, and you'll be seeing this same thing happen with some of these other pieces. Yeah. So to hold on to them, some of these others like this, some of these I'm just going to have to, I might just have to paint. No, this one I can grip here because that's this bit there goes into the steering wheel. This one I might have to just paint one side and then flip it over and paint the other, which means taking twice as long. But that's what I'll be working on today is these bits. And then like here you can see there's some raised detail on there. I'm going to highlight that with a darker color. Just these little round bits at least. Well, all the raised parts, just so that you can see them. Bottom too, which will not be visible. Given given how I'm talking so far, I'm going to guess that this is going to be a somewhat incoherent stream. Maybe the coffee will help. Let's find out. Yeah, I'm going to just start with the steering wheel, because that's the most delicate part. There's boundary lines between one color and the other, and I should probably do that while I'm still somewhat awake. I moved all my brushes so that they were easily accessible. Now they're not. The ones that I'll likely use. Sort of very carefully put them aside here where they look nice. I mean, they look nice. Like, I don't know if I'm going to bother showing it to you, but it's like the inside of corrugated cardboard. So there's little valleys that hold the brushes so they don't roll around, but it also made them hard to pull out. Okay, I'm going to need my head magnifiers for this because I need to see pretty much what I'm doing. I think I'll maybe start on the back. Looks like the red could probably use a second coat. That'll be easy to do. Put these on. I'll use these a little later for some of the other detail on these other bits, like on the brake pads and this upper arm control arm and the inside of the cockpit area here, where those bits there, the raised bits on either side, are actually like control things that need to be painted black. Little levers and dials and things. What I really need is material for a monologue. I mean, I really do need that. And I haven't really had any now for a couple of weeks. I was talking about old race cars and how dangerous it was, and how often Hauser engines didn't have any head gaskets so that they were very reliable, and how lethal the cars were. How in the 1950s and even early 60s, it was not unusual for someone to just put on a helmet and goggles and race in a t-shirt, because if it was hot out in the open wheel car, wanted to that would breeze on you, and now they got covered in rubber dust and oil and all sorts of stuff. It's actually it was quite a time. It was not unusual for several people to be killed every year racing. Now, it's a huge tragedy if it happens. Back then it was, well, it's racing. Not that everybody was just sort of cavalier about people dying. It was still very bad. And tribute was paid to those who did, but it seemed inevitable, because the cars just couldn't be adapted to have safety features, just the way they were designed. It really couldn't be done. If you look at some old roadsters, big cars and other sprint cars and things from the 50s and 60s, you'll see that the drivers are sitting pretty much upright, very much exposed, on the sides and the top. There was a roll bar that wouldn't be unusual for to really almost not extend beyond the head of the driver. Kind of something that was done just for show rather than as a real safety feature. Covering very well. Come back and do touch up. Well, it looks like it needs a second coat regardless. Bits of red that got onto the wheel, it's to the sprockets. In order to make that look good, I'm going to have to come back and put a second coat on it. But you can see, I don't know if you can see, I can see with the head magnifiers, it's not like even, it's not uniform, the paint. It's splotchy. There I got aluminum paint to the red, so I'll have to retouch the red. Just a tiny little spot. Brush stroke wasn't even. But I have to put a second coat of red on anyway. So I will do that after I get the second and possibly third coat of the aluminum paint on here. There aren't any bubbles in my paint. Probably looks okay on camera because, it's at a distance. See, I mean, that looks all right. Under magnification, yeah, not so much. Is that, what did I do that? Yeah, there's always that. Like a silver paint on the inside of the steering wheel there in a significant way. That's just, I don't know. It must have been one of those bringing the brush up to or away from the work. Let's say I have to put more red paint on there. We'll fix that when it comes back around. So one of the sort of dominant teams, I'll call it a team in racing, it's actually in the city where I grew up in Milwaukee. Roger Ward was actually quite a famous racer. He was champion once, I think, won the Indianapolis 500 twice, almost a third time. His cars were built by a guy named Watson, who was known to build the best cars in racing. I mean, that kind of racing, those kinds of cars anyway. And sponsored by the main sponsor, which means, you know, the one that got their name on it. And when they announced it, it was always the, you know, so-and-so special and this and that special, named after the lead sponsor. So this sponsor was Leader Card. And you say, you know, what is a Leader Card? Well, a Leader Card was a printing company that made like business cards and greeting cards. And, you know, it's kind of hard to imagine now where the expenses are so immense that it's, if you watch racing at all, you'll see not so much Formula One because those are all factory sponsored, but especially NASCAR and other, you know, smaller racing like the dirt tracks at the fairs and things like that. It's unusual to have a sponsor that gives enough money to keep their name on the car for an entire season, much less having the car named after them. So these were all Leader Card specials. We actually got to go there once when we were kids, got to go and see couple of the cars that were not racing that week. So we got to go up there and touch the outside and look on the inside, and met the owner of Leader Card, who gave us autographed pictures of the drivers, which have, you know, over time have disappeared, obviously, but they had. But that was pretty cool to see the cars. And they, you know, we were pretty young, probably like, well, under 10 anyway. We were pretty young. And, you know, to be able to get up close to a car like that was quite a thrill, really. Need a lot more of this now. So as I'm painting this part, this is the underbody, the bottom of the car, of the race car, the Lotus-Ford car. I'm painting the inside aluminum because it was made out of aluminum, and the inside wasn't painted like the outside, which was painted British racing green. Well, I should talk about that a bit too. So not only was this pretty innovative, it was kind of a repurposed Formula One car. It was modified to race on an oval track so that the suspension on the right side, for example, was built up longer and stronger than on the left side, because when you're turning left at high speeds, all the weight of the car, I'll just call it that, the mass of the car shifts to the right. So the suspension was more robust there to absorb that. I'm using a small brush to get some of the edges, okay, the edges of things, and then I'll use a much bigger brush with wider bristles to paint the rest of it. But this then minimizes the amount of paint that goes to places where I don't want it. We got to see the leader card specials. Everything was a lot less formal in a way, and that's definitely not the right word, but the open wheel racers, they had different categories of them. There were, as I recall, there were three. There were ones that were called midgets that usually raced on small dirt tracks, quarter mile, sometimes even an eighth of a mile, at places that we would, like fairgrounds, that kind of thing. Places that were semi-rural, and they'd have a place to put it. You could put a quarter mile dirt track in relatively cheaply. It's just dirt. You'd have to compact it down, that kind of thing. It couldn't just be any dirt. It had to have a lot of clay in it. It wasn't that hard to come up with it. So these would run on those kinds of tracks, and they really were tiny. They used the same sort of engine, so they were quite overpowered. And then there were what they were called sprint cars, which were a little bit bigger, had the same kind of engine in it, and they were designed largely to run on, like half mile, frequently still dirt. That they weren't paved; they were just dirt tracks. The mm-hmm. And then the larger size, they later became, I think they ended up being called champ cars later on. But because, they not the most innovative folks in the universe then, just called them big cars. And those are the ones that ran at Indianapolis and the paved mile in Milwaukee, okay, that's really not, this is bad. I need to clean this up. I was very careful opening and closing this thing, but I managed to spatter paint all over my pants. You can't see it. I'm not going to show it to you. I'm going to clean it up, though. It's happened once before. I am baffled by how I'm able to do that. So I'm off screen here, cleaning paint splotches on my pants because messy, just whatever, being messy. Well, said the forbidden word too. Yep. So these things were just called big cars because they were the largest of the three. I mean, they could have even called them the biggest cars, I suppose, because they were the largest of the three, but compared to the others. And they ran longer races, so they had more fuel capacity, and the speeds were a little higher. The engines were tuned differently. If I remember correctly, they actually only had it. I'm going to talk about the big cars because those are the ones we saw race at the racetrack that we saw races at. Occasionally there would be a sprint car race, but that was pretty unusual. Actually, I'll just digress a little bit. There were three racetracks built inside of each other. They were all ovals. Okay, not a road course with left and right turns. Later on, it was. They built one later, a road course inside the track. But, it's a mile oval, so there's a lot of room on the inside. That's where they had the garages where they would work on the cars, and the first aid center, that kind of thing. But there aren't any bubbles in it there. When I was, before I got distracted by that, this is what happens with this stream is I talk about something, and then something else comes up, and then I wander off talking about something else. And then sometimes I'll come back to what I was originally talking about. And sometimes it's gone, and you just have to wonder what it was, because it's not there anymore. Well, the second coat is looking pretty decent. I'm not sure I'll need a third. See what it looks like when it dries. After it dries, then I need to talk about the outside of this and fitting parts together. Because as I've been, thinking about the next several steps of construction, start raising questions about seams and whether they're going to get filled in or not. Are they going to show, and can anything be done anyway? Kind of a big question. Can anything be done anyway? In this case, the answer might be no. I think I'm going to just go ahead and continue using this brush on the next couple of pieces. I'm going to do the suspension arms. Same thing, just put a toothpick in there, put some paint on it. Prongs on the end they're getting painted because I'm just, not avoiding it. But that's gonna have to be scraped off, so that, for two reasons. One is so that the part actually fits in the little hole. If it's got paint on it and the designed fit is pretty tight, then it needs to be scraped off just so that it fits in the hole. The other reason is that I want to use the model cement that welds the part in, and not the contact cement, because these little bits there, those tiny little prongs, apparently the way this is built, hold the entire suspension up. Attach it to the car. When I built this as a kid, I don't remember it. Well, it held together, I think. Because I actually completed the model, as I recall. But I don't remember worrying about it. Hey, thanks for joining in. I appreciate you coming in to listen to me mutter on about racing in the 1960s. Racing big cars, that's what they called them, because they were larger than the midgets and the sprints. Very clever naming. racing also was not, it was not a lucrative sport. The costs were low because the drivers got paid next to nothing comparatively, despite the fact that they were risking their lives, seriously risking their lives every time they got in the car and drove it. So yeah, a business card company was able to build, maintain, sponsor two of these big cars and a collection of midgets and sprints, all pretty much on its own. There were other sponsors that got their decals on the sides of the car, that kind of thing. But it was very different. The so the main race that I saw was the Rex Mays Classic, which was the Sunday of the weekend after the Indianapolis 500. So it was a pretty big race. All these people were fresh off of the Indy 500, which is, in some people's minds, the only race, for open wheel racing. But it wasn't. There was an entire season. People, the winner of the Indianapolis 500 was not necessarily the season champion. That was a whole, just like now, there was a whole point system. I need just like a plain piece of paper that isn't a paper towel. And I don't have one, so I guess I'll just use one. A paper towel. There's this little bit here that there isn't any real way to grab onto it. This is the bottom. I'm painting that first, and then I'll paint the top. And I'm just painting the edges because this part here on both sides, actually that paint will have to be scraped off so that it adheres to the bottom of this part here that you can't see because it's off camera now. The bottom of this, and it adheres to the bottom of this to hold the steering column, which is this. I'm going to clip the very point of this because that's what that actually goes into the steering wheel and holds on to the steering wheel. Theoretically, find out if this actually happens. Theoretically, the steering actually works on this model. That is to say, when the steering wheel is turned, it turns this bit, and then this thing here fits into a hole on the next part that I'm going to be painting, which then is supposed to turn the wheels. And it's all made out of thin little pieces of brittle plastic that were originally in the kit chrome plated. I've sanded that down and primed it so that they can be painted a much more authentic aluminum color, which is what I'm doing now. So when I built this kit back in like 1966, when it was original, this particular kit not, but one just like it, identical to this, came out after the race in like 1966. I seem to recall that it actually worked. I mean, it worked until it broke, until the steering wheel broke off of this, or this little bit here broke off on the other part, or maybe even just the suspension parts came out of the holes where they're supposed to be. We'll see how that fits together. Probably Wednesday when I get back to this. These bits are really complicated. Okay, they go. These are the brakes, and these are disc brakes. That's what they're supposed to look like. This fits into the wheel somehow. The steering attaches here, and then these prongs on this side and this side go into these on the bottom and these on the top. So part of what will happen after all of this is done is I'll need to see if those parts actually fit. I'm going to clamp it here, because just like that other piece I just did, that goes into the wheel and gets cemented on. So I can safely clamp it there. And if it doesn't get painted, that's just as well, because don't want it painted. If I can do this without spattering it all over my pants. Now my pants, those need to go in the laundry now. Not that that's a big deal, it's just annoying. I've run out of little places to hold these. I'm going to take the steering wheel out because I need place for two of them, two more parts. And I've only got a place for one. It looks like there's, if you were, here, I'll just put this on camera. Why not? It looks like there's 3 holes here, but this one's too small for the alligator clips. They don't hold. Probably the wrong brush for this. I should be using a smaller one, and I will get back to this. There's just so many little nooks and crannies that I'm going to come back and look at this with the head magnifiers later after this dries to make sure I didn't miss any spots. The other thing with this is that this is like 4 in the real car. There's like 4 parts here. There's the axle, which is this bit here that goes into the wheel. There's the suspension parts that go up, the connecting parts that go up and down into the upper and lower suspension arms. There's this round bit, which is supposed to be, I think, the brake, which is made out of a totally different material. And so what I'm going to do with this is actually paint some of these parts different colors. Like this axle, I'm going to paint this darker because it would have been made out of probably a heavier duty material. And the brakes, I'm also going to be painting darker. At least the round, this flat part and around it, not this here necessarily. This is where a spinner goes on. The spinner goes on there to hold the whole thing onto the rest of the car. Holds the wheel on. And then these here and here fit into the suspension pieces there. And there. One thing didn't happen, which is good. The thing that didn't happen is it didn't pop off of the alligator clip. It could have happened, but it didn't. I didn't lie about my the thing that says what we're painting. it's not unusual to for the answer to what are we painting or what we're painting. It's not a question as much as a statement, I guess. What we're painting, it's not unusual for that to be nothing. I'm not painting anything because I'm doing sanding or fitting parts together or just doing more sanding so that I can fit parts together. Today, I'm actually painting, and I'm painting with aluminum or aluminium, depending on your location. You call the metal, because most of these parts were actually made out of aluminum. Some were steel, like the axle probably was, which is why I'm going to paint it darker. And some were just, a brighter color than others. But none of them were chromed, and this kit, all these parts were chrome plated, which caused great complications because the chrome plating isn't always even. Bumps. It's just not a good idea. It was, I don't know why. I don't know why it was done. When I built this kit originally, back in 1966 or thereabouts, everything just stayed chrome plated. That's how it came out of the box. That's how it got glued together. And I didn't paint any of it. I didn't try to make any of it look any more authentic than the kit itself. There's a lot to be said for building a kit when one is in probably 14 or 15, would have been about 15. I'm assuming that it ended up looking pretty okay. Not great, but okay. Okay, this part is, again, there's no place. Maybe one of these will fit in here. These are like guess that'll work. Yeah, okay. I'm going to just do that. I thought that I would have to lay this flat, but there is that opening there, and this opening is where that thing goes. So if it's not painted on the inside, I guess that's okay. So yeah, the Milwaukee Mile is actually historic. It is now and has been for a while, the oldest continuously operated racetrack in the country, and it was the site of the very first race after the Indianapolis 500. So I was saying it was always pretty exciting to have, the people that we had just heard about on the radio. It wasn't televised, in the 50s and 60s. Although there was an innovation a couple of years later. I can talk about that if I remember to come back to it. But we listen to the race on the radio, we get to know the drivers' names, and then we go to the race the weekend after that and see these same people in the same cars. That was pretty exciting. The Rex Mays Classic was one of those things that was it was a memorial. Rex Mays was unfortunately died at the racetrack, crashing into what we would call midway between turns 1 and 2 on the oval. It's a plaque on the wall. I guess it was kind of morbid in a way, but it was a memorial plaque on the wall where his car hit. Racing was because it was so dangerous, it was also more careful. You watch races now and they're interrupted by yellow flags all the time because of accidents. And sometimes they look really horrific, but the safety features there are safety features, which there weren't back then. So people are able to, as they say, walk away, not feeling great, but still, not seriously injured. But when there were no safety features, any kind of collision was going to be very bad, potentially deadly. And that happened to Rex Mays at that racetrack. And that's why the race was named after him, to memorialize him. And I guess as a reminder to everybody every year about how dangerous it really was. Which it is. It was. Maybe I shouldn't. That was just really dumb. I was using this piece of paper towel as a place to just hold that part before I flipped it over to get this brush clean. I'm using, I went back to isopropyl alcohol. I found with the lacquer thinner that I needed to change it out way too often. What happens with this isopropyl alcohol in this jar, this is my solvent jar, is that the pigments from the brush just settle on the bottom of the jar and the solvent itself stays relatively clean. With the lacquer thinner, that was not the case. The pigments didn't really dissolve, but became fully suspended in the liquid. And then when I tried to wash the brush, they just re-adhered to the brush. It was like having to start over all the time. What is going to happen next is I'm going to go back to a little bitty brush and put a second coat on the steering wheel. And then flip this over. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. And paint the other side of it. In the meantime, this is dry. I can just set that down like I did. And this is drying. And this brush is, just put it slightly out of the way anyway. Now to put my head magnifier back on so that I can see the parts of the steering wheel that I'm painting. The steering wheel itself is red. You know, it's kind of weird. You wouldn't think that, right? But stirring the paint with the brush, but I did. The little metal particles start to settle out. You know, to come back and touch up some red. I managed to get some of this paint on the inside of the steering wheel, and one or two spots got the metallic paint too far up onto the steering wheel. So they're going to be tiny little dots of paint either in there, and hopefully not get it onto the metal part. You know, the part that's painted metallic, because this doesn't cover the red all that well. The red will cover the metallic pretty well, and it doesn't work in the opposite direction. Well, yeah, now I remember what I was going to say. Is as I'm thinking about painting this, you know, and dealing with the seams and all sorts of stuff, you know, what's going to show and what isn't going to show, and what can be done about it and what can't be done about it, which I'll talk about later. It's going to be painted British Racing Green, which is the color that these were the two cars in 64 and 65. They did race in 64 as well, but they had tire failure, and so they had to be withdrawn from the race. They were painted British Racing Green, which was a huge to-do. Not because it was British, okay? I mean, it was just British, because these cars, the Lotus was a Formula One car made in Britain, fitted with a U.S. Ford engine, so it was, you know, there was a U.S. thing about that as well. I got some on there too. Just really. So that wasn't the problem. It wasn't, oh, it's a British color. It was that green was considered to be a real bad luck color. I don't know why. I don't know the history behind it, but I do know that nobody ever painted their car green in the open wheel racing, because that was considered to be bad luck. And you know, you didn't want to have bad luck when you were, you know, putting your life on the line on a racetrack. I ran out of places to put this. I don't know if those are dry enough to set down yet or not. Now I'm left holding this. But so it was green with the yellow stripe, which were the team colors of Lotus and of Britain. Actually, at the time, and I guess they still do, there are countries have their colors There, and when racing was associated with different countries, like it was in Formula One, that was how it was done. Or in endurance racing, like the ones that the GT41 at one point. The guess I'm just going to have to take this off, and I'll set it down here. Like that. I'm going to set it down. If you can see it in the box, I'm setting it down so that it's raised up off the surface because of a wrinkle in the paper towel there. But I made a mess of this. I got metallic paint on where the red needs to go, and who knows, it may end up taking 2 coats of red to cover that up again. Just did it. I mean, just managed to bump, as I so frequently do, bump the brush onto a place other than where it's supposed to go. Yeah, so it was a green car, oh no. But, it turned out that it wasn't bad luck. It was in 1964 when a tire blew out, and there was a pretty serious crash with Jim Clark. But it wasn't in 1965 when the car won. And then when it came to Milwaukee the very next week, it set they set a track record, and handily won the race. There were 2 of them. It wasn't the green one won the Indianapolis 500 and the Milwaukee race, but the other one was actually painted in U.S. racing colors. U.S. racing colors are, red, white, and blue. So you would get a red car with a white stripe, or a blue car with a white stripe, or a white car with a blue stripe. I don't remember ever seeing one painted white with a red stripe, although I'm sure it was done. So these stripes, they were painted down the center of right down the center of the car. Pretty broad stripe. That's why you'll see, like if you see a Cobra or something like that, or a Cobra replica, probably, because the real Cobras are worth too many millions of dollars to actually come out other than the car show. It's on right now. The one that the Lotus-Ford that was racing along with the green and yellow one was white with a blue stripe. And you'll see that paint stream on old Mustangs, the GT 350s and GT 500s. They were always painted with a racing stripe. Usually they were red with a white stripe or white with a blue stripe. Although the best combination, I have to say, was blue with a white stripe, but that paint scheme doesn't show very often. So there, a little bit of unsolicited actual history of racing car colors. Okay, this piece is the tail piece. This goes on the back of the car, and just like the inside of the body, okay, this is aluminum. This was made out of aluminum, and I'm going to paint the inside aluminum because if it shows at all, and I don't know if it will, it wasn't painted green. I'm pretty sure it was just the bare metal, and only the outside was painted. So I'm going to put a second coat on this later when I get some aluminum. Yep. I thought there was enough in there, but there isn't. I'll be putting a second coat on this because it needs a second coat. I'd almost forgotten about this piece. But I'm doing this to all of the parts of the body. I'm painting the insides aluminum, and then the outside of this one will be painted British Racing Green because this is a model of the one that won, which was painted British Racing Green. That's pretty streaky, which is why it will need a second coat later on, even though it's probably never going to show. That is, you won't be able to see it once the model is assembled. Okay, well, that wash water is pretty full of little sparkly bits of metal from the aluminum paint. I think nowadays that sometimes drivers will actually let their cars be painted green. I think that tradition of green being bad luck, I'm not sure how it started. Probably someone had a terrible crash in a green car. Just what happens as a result. I need to do red touch-up on the steering wheel because I got aluminum paint there and in the inside and just pretty much just made a mess of it. And then I'm going to paint some of the detail on this piece, the inside of the body, and these parts here, and then a second coat on the inside of this. But first, I'm going to get a little bit of a stretch here. Stretch my back a little bit, have some coffee. Other ways, that in a lot of ways the racing was kind of primitive. But aerodynamics were a thing. Cars were made, even the big cars with the drivers sitting right up in front with this tiny little windshield. That's all it was the air hit that and it was supposed to go up over the top of the helmet. Probably didn't. It just hit them in the face. That there wasn't an issue of downforce. The part of the speeds were limited by the adhesion of the car to the track, and especially on the turns, there could be a tendency for, and there was on the big cars, is as the speeds increased, the left front tire actually came up off the track. You could watch it. The forces pushed the car so much to the right, the outside of the turn, that the left front tire, where there wasn't very much weight, would lift up off the track and lose adhesion. So that was kind of a problem. And what they started talking about, and this again happened in the 1960s, is what can you do to keep the car pushed down onto the track? And that's when they started talking about downforce. which was creating an aerodynamic force that would push down. It was essentially the same thing as an airplane, a wing that lifted the plane, except pushed down. And there was actually some experiments with that, where they would take a big car and they would stick a big wing. They just fashion one out of aluminum, just pound it together and rivet it. It was up like 2 feet above the back of it, and they actually experimented with it on the track. And again, it was an inverted airplane wing that pushed down instead of lifted up. And it actually kind of worked. And then, things have just gotten stupid. I'll just say that there are just so many wings and winglets and everything else moving air around, pretty much designed just to push the car down onto the track. That's the whole point of it. And it made a big difference, not so much in terms of straight line speed. Any wing like that's pushing something down or up creates drag as well. So the straight line speeds, straightaway speeds, weren't necessarily jumping, but the car didn't have to slow down as much to get through the turn, because it just pushed it down onto the track, so that all the tires were, getting maximum grip. So the consequences of that, well, first of all, for the driver, it wasn't all that great, because if you go through the turn faster, how the whole car is being pushed to the right. If you're turning left, it goes to the outside. The mass shifts to the outside of the turn. Well, so does your body, especially your head. And these cars, there was no head support. Sometimes there's barely a seat belt. So as the cornering speeds increased, their head was being pushed, and it put a lot of strain on their neck muscles, and there were, neck injuries as a result of that. It wasn't all that terrific, and it wasn't until different iterations of the cars that this needs a third coat. Okay, especially along the tops here where it's kind of visible. The different, there weren't any head restraints. There was nothing there, just your neck. And so it was very, very hard on the drivers, and you get neck injuries just from the strain of keeping one's head up. It was, but the cars did go faster in the turns, and so, speed records were set. And because the cars were going faster through the turns, I guess I can just leave these up. It's not hurting anything. I could just putting some in the box so that they're out of the way. These are not going to get any different shade as a highlight at all. They're just that. They're just what they are. Yeah, this needs a second coat. This needs a third coat. This little bit I'm going to put in the box. My in-process box. Once the paint is fully dry, those bits will go into they'll still be in here because they need to be assembled. Yeah, there's this brush. There's a spot here. I can put this back. Put that there. You can watch the paint dry. This, yeah, I'm just gonna do along the tops here on both sides. The inside, I probably will just go ahead and put another coat on just to do it. the other thing that happened when there were big cars, or this particular car that didn't have any wings on it, is they were designed to create as little drag as possible, okay, to be streamlined. Just that's the right word, so that the air, as it moves through the air would move as smoothly as possible around the cars. Because any kind of vortices, ripples in the air, would actually create drag or friction, you could call it that would slow the cars down. And so these cars were designed to be very slippery, I might say, as they went through the air at like 135, 160 miles an hour. When you put wings on them, end up getting all sorts of turbulence from the wings. And so actually the wings created drag, which tended to slow the car down, as I'd mentioned. It tended to slow the car down, but it could go faster through the turns. And so that the average speed, or the lap time, how long it took to get around a particular track, it went down pretty significantly, mainly because of the cornering speeds, which were very hard on the drivers, especially their necks. Guess I'm going to go back to this just to get excess paint off the brush. But the other thing it did, and this is plaguing racing to this day, is that all this turbulence made it very difficult for cars to drive close to each other. There's turbulence, like a wake, a turbulent wake of air behind these cars. And they couldn't get close to each other. And so if you couldn't get close, because the air was bouncing your car all over the place, making it very hard to control, couldn't pass. And if you watch an open wheel race now, Formula One or IndyCar, either one, what you'll see is that once they get past the start, where they're all kind of bunched together, they'll get into a single line. Okay, just they just line up, and that the distance between the cars is virtually identical from one car to the next. Okay, so you'll look at them and you'll see that the first car in line will be there, and the next car in line will be probably like 2.5 car lengths behind it. And the car after that will be 2.5 car lengths behind it, and so on. And what's happening is that that's how far back you need to be out of the wake or the turbulence from the wings in the car in front of you. And then they'll just go on forever. The only time they'll get close to each other sometimes is if there's a road course, especially if there's a kind of a sharp turn where the cars need to slow down quite a bit. And sometimes the car behind will, put its brakes on later, drive further into the turn at higher speeds before slowing down, and they can catch up, and then there's less turbulence at lower speeds. So this is a rant about modern racing, which means, racing since about 1974 or 5, is that putting the wings on the car improved lap time significantly. They could go through the turns faster. But it made it much harder on the drivers until they got decent head restraints, and also ruined racing. Okay, so the cars are going faster, but so what? They couldn't pass each other. And so you might have a car, and I mean, seriously, you might have a car that, were it not for that, might be 4 or 5 miles, maybe 2 or 3 miles an hour faster than the car in front of you. But you can't pass because the turbulence from the wing is so much that you can't get close enough to pull up and go around. And so, yeah, it made the speeds faster and all sorts of records were getting set. But the racing isn't very good. You know, racing doesn't mean just going fast unless you're doing a drag race where it's just you go fast, okay, in a straight line. You know, if you're doing more than 4 seconds of drag racing, you want to be able to pass somebody so that you can, finish further ahead. But if you can't pass because of the turbulence in the wings, it's not really racing. It's just driving in a line. And you'll see that in IndyCar racing, especially on ovals. Okay, especially on ovals, and you'll see it in virtually every Formula One race, where passing is a rare event. It was actually a joke once. You know, it's the same thing is kind of true of NASCAR stock car racing now. There's a lot of turbulence behind the cars that they need to, probably address in some way by minimizing the height of the spoiler. I know it makes it harder for the drivers because they have to slow down more for the turns. They have to be much more careful going into and out of the turns. But it makes it much more racy where people can pass each other if there isn't all that turbulence from the wings, or in the case of a NASCAR, the spoiler on the back. So that I didn't see before. So that's my kind of rant about that. I think that racing would be a lot better if they just didn't allow wings, because then cars could actually get close to each other and pass each other. And it'd be more dependent upon the skill of the driver than about the setup of the car, or the aerodynamic forces. That's just my thought. I doubt that will happen because, everybody's invested in downforce and wings and things. But, it's kind of disappointing watching some of these races. So the NASCAR stock cars and, the tracks that you see, the dirt tracks at county fairs and things, at least there's some passing that will go on from time to time. There was a joke once that I heard it, I don't know if it's true, that in Formula One, they give out an award for bunches of stuff, but one of the things that they gave out an award for was Overtaker of the Year, which means the driver who had passed the most cars. Oh, the story I'm telling about race car passing, whether, what they call it in Europe, it's called overtaking, catching up and passing, moving up from like 5th place to 4th place, right? Going past a car or overtaking them, is that they gave an award for Overtaker of the Year, which means the driver that had passed the most cars during the year. Usually somebody who was sort of, tended to start in the back a little bit. Oh no. Phone call attempt, is it about your computer? So the joke was that and I think it was, I don't know if it's a joke, probably was true, it's just that it came across as a joke, is that the person who was the Overtaker of the Year had made as many passes as most drivers do in the first half of one NASCAR race. It just didn't happen. Okay, so that one was okay. So your PC is getting close to being redone? You're going to be able to claim it soon? Oh, really? Are you just getting like a voicemail or a robot or something? Okay, this bit here um, probably could use a third coat on the inside. Maybe I'll do that. This part here is pretty much done. I need to paint the black bits here on the sides and hopefully not get it onto the metallic paint underneath. These parts, I think, yeah. And I'm going to do some cleaning up here. Every time I touch something, there's the danger of it becoming a problem. I'm going to take these parts off and put them in the box. Nice. It'll be great to have that back. It's been a couple of weeks that you've been without it. You've been without it for quite a while, but it's been in repair. So it's going to be really nice to have that back. So is the bank just not answering their phone? Oh, yeah, that. All of our operators are busy. Your call is very important to us. We'll get to you as soon as we can. And then they don't, right? As soon as they can is like sometime in the far distant future. Why? Oh, no. Really? More than 3 hours? 2 hours. 2 hours, three different times? Okay, this part, I'm going to put another coat on that, on this one. Do that now. Well, the paint is still good. And you didn't get anywhere. So you spent 6 hours of your life waiting for them to answer the phone and it never got answered. That's pretty awful. I mean, that's really awful. Kind of beyond unacceptable into just the ludicrous. And what I should do is I should examine these parts to make sure. I'm going to put my head magnifiers on for just a moment to look at these parts to make sure that the base coat is based. Good grief. So you waited for 2 hours or so, and then all you just got was a message, oh, by the way, while we were ignoring your call, we're closed. It is incredibly frustrating. Yeah, I've had some frustrating phone calls, but nothing to compare with that. That's just absolutely horrible. Thank you for being a loyal customer. I'm sure you probably got that or something similar, right? What will happen? Oh, you're going to try at 8? You're going to try to call? Good luck. I'm just dabbing paint on here on little spots that look like they're maybe not painted as well as they should be. I'm sure that when I examine this later, I'm going to find spots that needed to be painted and then just simply weren't. Okay, and then I'm going to slap a third coat on the inside of that. Yeah, yeah. I would like you. I would like you to record 2.5 hours of wait on hold music. Yeah, please record that. I want you to use up your computer memory so that when the managers review the call, they can listen to the same. I don't know if you guys have that, but they will play really useless music while you're waiting for your call to go through, which may or may not ever happen. Yeah, it's so common to just have to wait so long. Yeah, I'm sure that's the case, is that they really don't record until someone actually picks it up. But I think they should. I think they should record the entire call from the time you call until your call is finished. So for quality purposes, they can judge the quality of the music or whatever it is that they're playing while you're waiting for your call to be answered. I think I'm going to try. I think what's going to happen is before I start painting little detail bits, because that's what's coming up next, is like touching up the red steering wheel and painting the little detail on these parts, is I'm going to have to take a really quick break. You know, another one of those, I'm not putting the break screen up, but I need to be off camera because coffee. And then I'll be painting some detail, and then I want to talk about this piece, if I can remember, and about the piece that goes over it, because it provides for me a little bit of a quandary about how to ahead with the next couple of stages of this. No, not a coffee hunt, a coffee movement. So I'm going to be off camera. You can watch the paint here. You can look at the painted parts, including the stuff that's drying in these little wells. And I'll be back in like 3 minutes. There, back. Yeah, coffee consequences. Um, I'll do the steering wheel first because I've messed it up. I got the aluminum paint on the inside pretty well, but then I touched the brush to all sorts of little bits and places, and it was looking good, and then it got messed up because of just carelessness. I guess I would just call it that. But that's a common occurrence on this particular stream is insomnia. Yeah, too much coffee, too little coffee. There's always just the results of coffee. Um, those are like brake lines. They're supposed to be. I'm going to have to. I'm going to do some really fine detail painting on parts of this, or at least I'm going to try when I get around to it. I'll explain later. But I'll explain now. It looks like if you look, your camera guy, come in close. Is if you look like right here, okay, there's this little knob there, and then there's a line across that, a raised thing. I think that's supposed to be the brake line, and I'm going to try to paint that black. Even just that tiny little bit. Maybe I'll even try to use a pen on it. These bits here, I'm just going to paint a darker shade of aluminum. I'm going to leave this as it is. That's kind of a structural strengthening thing. I'm going to say it's the same material. But these little bits here, I'm going to paint a darker shade of metallic, and then I'm going to make this line black, either with paint or with a felt tip pen. I like using the felt tip pen. It gives a little more control, but if it's I can't paint over it, and because I can't paint over it, the only solution is to wipe it off and then start over if it's possible to do that. I made a huge mess of that on the Apollo model by trying to highlight a feature that didn't even need to be highlighted, but I was trying using the felt tip pen and got one tiny little dot off of where it was supposed to be on the gold paint, and I tried to paint over it to touch it up, and it dissolved in the gold paint, and then instead of having one tiny little black dot, I had one very large grayish blot, and I ended up having to strip all the paint off the part completely and reprime it because of one little dot. This, I'm going to go silent while I'm doing this. It involves tiny little dots of paint. Be the wrong brush for this. Yeah, the brush. The paint is drying on the tip of the brush and not coming off onto the part. Try again, but it's a little kind of frustrating there. There. I'm into one of those walking and chewing gum moments again that I've talked about periodically, where I just have to not talk while I'm trying to put the paint on this. Maybe it's on camera, maybe it's not. I look at it from one angle, it looks good, and then not from the other. You got a little bit of red spot there. Tiny little spot there that I need to touch up with the aluminum paint in the other direction, which will be somewhat difficult because it doesn't cover that well. But I will do my best. To get, the back and forth of one color and the other until I am satisfied with the line between the two. I am really impressed with how poorly I had painted the silver paint, aluminum paint onto this, and how much touching up there needs to be. I thought I had done a much better job than apparently I had. To just go around it again. I know there was a spot where I hit it with the silver paint, and I'm not sure. It was a pretty big one, pretty big spot. I'm not sure that I have adequately touched it up. So there's just one tiny little dot of red paint there. I'm unhappy with the interface between the aluminum paint and the red paint. Otherwise, I think this looks okay. And surprisingly, the color is pretty much the right color too. All right. So dot. I have one tiny little dot that I need to dot. After this is dry, I want to make sure that it's dry before I do it. I don't want to put some aluminum paint on there and have it bleed in with the red. That would be unfortunate. So this is the part of the stream where I'm putting little dots of paint on little spots that may or may not really be evident when the model is completed, but I'm trying to get the detail, as much as I can. To look as nice as it. Well, I'm just trying to make it look like a A- model, maybe even an A in some areas. Pretty good brush, but I want something with just shorter bristles to give me a little better control. As I'm painting the rest of this detail, looking at this, I think this is what I'm going to use. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to paint. I'm not going to paint the black quite yet. I'm going to paint this. I'm going to use, I want it to be fairly good contrast. I'm going to use dark aluminum, which has a fair amount of dark pigment in it. It's highlighting the dots, okay? And then I'm going to try to do the break line in black. I'm not sure. Maybe with paint. Maybe I'll try it. I think I will try it with paint. The felt tip pen, really, really fine felt tip pen. It's like less than half of a milliliter across. It's like a tenth of a milliliter. It's millimeter. But like I said, if the little dot of ink gets in the wrong place, cleaning it up becomes a real challenge. Having learned that very much the hard way. Okay, there's that. Here is a clump of dried paint. What's that? What's the dreadful thought? Oh no, you're going to make the character cry? What are you going to do, and why? Mm-hmm. Just spattered again. Good grief. I just felt it spatter. I could just feel it. And I had the paper towel over it, but not in the right place. These pants might become work pants sooner than later. It's not good to have paint splatters on them. Yeah, I mean, you can't if you're a mechanical doll. Oh no, so she's going to find out. Like, why can't I have children? Oh, because you're not like a real person. Oh my. That's actually kind of tragic. I fully understand how that could be part of the reality of the character. Well, I think I'm going to continue my rant about wings on racing cars. I mean, at the time, I actually remember thinking about that when I was even like a little kid. Of course, she would think that. I mean, why wouldn't she think that she could have a child because she thinks she's human? But then to find out that she can't would oh, that would be a very tragic thing. Especially it depends on how she's told. I mean, how is the news broken to her? It could be done in an incredibly insensitive way. Hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that these little lines here are supposed to be the brake lines. And this should be painted black. Although in real life they might have been, instead of just rubber, they might have been metal coated or metal covered. I'm going to try my best to paint them black. And then if necessary, I'll do touching up. I think I'll be able to do that. Definitely going to give it a try. I'll be using black paint on the detail on the inside of that later anyway, so that'll give me a chance to do the lines at the same time. I'm going to be painting these brake parts this dark color. And that shaft. I'm not sure why I'm doing this other than why not? The you could tell one part from another. The brush slipped. I'm going to have to come back and touch up around. Well, I guess not. This whole part gets painted this color. Okay, I thought I had created a problem, but I didn't. Getting into my paying attention to detail, and I can't do anything else. Situation again. The brakes. And then I'm going to paint this. This brush isn't the best brush for it. I'm going to paint the axle this dark color as well, because it would have been made under of a different metal than the rest of this. The rear suspension parts here, or the front. Actually, this is the front. It would be, to find out, that you care about kids and you run a toy shop for them and you want to have kids of your own and then find out that you can't for whatever reason, but to find out that you can't potentially, finding out that you're not even human, that you're not even what you think you are. That could be pretty devastating. So it'd be interesting how you will play that out. But that's an altogether plausible scenario. I mean, that's actually a thing that she could run into, given her circumstances and her desires. That's okay. I'll do the other one, but I need to rinse this off. I did that. I did that thing where I just rushed. I brought the brush up to the surface way too fast. There, I was able to get it off. Sometimes I can do that if I wipe it off quickly enough. But then it helps too to dry it off because then the paint runs. Okay, well, I'm going to paint this first because I'm making a mess of the brake. You know, yeah, that's all part of the tragic development of your character. I really appreciate your character development skills. Your talent in, not just coming up with kind of a general idea of what your character would be like, but to get into all sorts of details like that about what that character's life would have been like. That's why I think we talked about this before, is you could write short stories. I mean, not just make up the characters for potential gameplay, but to write short stories about them. And especially this one. There's enough things in this character's life to really to make a story, to make a little novella kind of thing. I think you've thought about that, haven't you? About maybe writing her story up into a story. If there's anybody else in chat, but so you might want to provide some feedback about that. Whether you think that would make an interesting story and is maybe worth spending some time writing it. Yeah, it might be you consider it to be a skeleton or an outline, but I think there's enough there. I think there's enough there that you could flesh it out into a real story. I don't know if you have the time, but if you had the time, I think it might be kind of interesting to try to do that. Well, there's parts here that just didn't get painted. That's pretty and I did it twice. So I'm going to have to do some aluminum touch-up. And I would kind of wait to do that until maybe I painted the rest of this, but I just want to get this done, so I'm just going to get this done. I probably will need to do touching up with this color again later. Let's see if I can do this without spattering all over my clothes. And I'm not worried about the spinner goes there. Let's just say another part fits in that, but there are parts with no paint. Okay, well, I hadn't seen that before, but there's residual bits of chrome plating on there. So these are really obvious places too. Okay, I'm going to, it's kind of an annoyance. No, she wouldn't be, definitely not that. She'd have to talk to some confidant. But, you know, if you wrote the story outside of the game, it could turn out that she's got some like close friends from school, people that she knows and trusts, and they might be the ones that would have the conversation in a story, not necessarily in the game. Just a thought. The what I'm running into here in the model is that there's just flaws. I wonder if the other one, the round one, might be pointier. It's like lumps, bumps and lumps of excess plastic here. Take off and then repaint, because it was like not obvious until the paint got on it, and then it's pretty obvious. This comes from the chrome plating. This just created excess excess material I'm trying to scrape out with some success. It looks better than it did. No. Get that off and then put paint back on it before it's too late. Well, it's not perfect, but it was, there's a difference between not perfect and being unacceptable. And it was unacceptable. And now it's acceptable, if not perfect. But I caught that and decided to do something about it while the paint was still available. Still kind of a ridge there, but that will not be visible without these head magnifiers. Okay. Stretch a little bit here. What am I doing on the time? Got about an hour. I'm going to, yeah, since I have the aluminum paint out, I almost forgot. I've got a spot. It's one tiny little spot on the steering wheel that I need to fix, and I hope I can do that. That's right. She's got the regeneration talent or capability. I think that will now be invisible without the magnifiers. I'm getting pretty close to, I need to be really careful with painting detail because I'm starting to lose focus, but I do want to try. I want to try with the black now, with the flat black on these bits in here and the brake lines. Hopefully I won't mess it up. Let's find out. Let's find out if I will mess it up or not. I will. I'm messing something up. Getting brushes scattered all over the place. But before I do that, I'm going to stretch a little bit and not mess up this brush. This is the one I want to use. Oh, you have a really, that's really cool. So it's like a little heating pad plushie. I like that a lot. I know it's kind of weird, but I really like plushies. And I did when I was a little kid, and I'm still a sucker for buying them. Usually I give them, to other people, but sometimes I will keep one. There was ages ago these things called Beanie Babies. You might be familiar with them. You never know. And it was collectible, and the kids always wanted one, and we had lots of them. And there was a platypus that they named Platinum. I thought that was pretty funny. That sounds really very pleasant. Very nice way to relax. I was going to stretch my back a little bit and then get this black paint out. And there's these little things here that are instruments that are, when I look at the car, they're painted black. Of course it is. Well, I was going to show you this. This is before I start painting the detail. And I'm going to have to take another little break because old person and kidneys. This is the inside of the car. And then this goes on top of it like this. Okay. And then there's the nose cone that goes underneath here. So this is the nose cone will go underneath here, and this will be one part. And I'm going to do the same thing here that I did before with the bulkhead back here, which is to fill in the seam and sand it down so that it doesn't show. But what happens here is that no matter what I would do, when this part goes on top of this part, like this, there will be a seam. Okay. The parts just, and they don't line up. There's these little alignment pins and alignment holes there. And they fit okay, but there's a seam there. And I think what I'd really like to do is fill that in and sand it down, but I can't. It just can't be done. So I'm just going to have to live with it like this. So there'll be two separate parts, and they'll be cemented together. And there will be a well-controlled little seam between the two. I just wanted to test that to see how it would go and make a decision about how to handle it. And now I've decided how I'm going to handle it. So that was important. Wow. Yeah. I need, I hate to do this, but I need to take another 3-minute break. I will be back in just a bit. But before I start painting tiny little detail bits, I need to do this. Apologize for that, but sometimes, as they say, nature calls, and that's that, and that's that. Okay, I'm going to stir this paint. I'm going to paint the brake lines. Hopefully that will work okay. And then a little detail in here. And then it's probably pretty much all I'm going to be able to accomplish in terms of painting today. I could spend a little bit of time fitting parts together just to check to see if they fit. Okay, I could do some of that. Or I could show off Dyson Dungeons dungeon tiles. I think I will do that. I think I'll do that for sure. And then maybe what I'll do is, if there's some time left, I'm going to get some other parts out, move along to look at the next set of parts that I can start prepping on Wednesday. On Wednesday, I'm going to be test fitting a bunch of this stuff and taping this. Yeah, duh. I have to tape this so I can paint it green. How could I not remember that? It's like this has to be painted green. And I can't do that until it's taped off. So I'm going to be spending some time on Wednesday taping this to prepare it for spray painting. So on Friday, we might be able to do some assembly of the front suspension, the parts that go up here, these bits that are all hanging around here. And I'm going to also start working on the instrument panel, because that's going to take, I wanted to start that at the beginning of a stream when I, pretty well focused and all of that. So that's what's going to happen on Wednesday, is I will be working on the instrument panel and taping the lower body section here so that I can get it ready to paint green. And then I'll be talking about some next steps or some things that I'm going to need to test. Oh my. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if she's struggling with her own situation, I'm not sure that would be in character. Okay, well, it's not coming along perfect. It's not too bad. Touching the paint to the raised surface of the line. Yeah, I made a problem there. I'll have to touch that up. Not a surprise that I'll have to be doing touch-up. Yeah. Well, this was worth trying. I think I can fix it, by going back and forth with paint. It just got kind of messy. The question will be whether I can get the aluminum paint to cover the black or not. Otherwise, I might have to do something else, but you could see it just turned out to be sloppy. It just, paint on the brush just isn't behaving. So, I don't know what I'll end up doing there. I'm going to try to salvage it, but I'm really disappointed in how it turned out. So I'll let that dry, and I'll come back with the aluminum paint. If worse comes to worse, and if it's really not salvageable, I can just reprime it and start over. I have been known to do that. But if I can get the aluminum paint to cover, okay, I should be able to fix that, because I'll be painting up to a raised surface, which is easier for me than touching paint to the top of a raised surface. Well, you can see where it's supposed to go, but you can also see that it's pretty much just a mess that needs to be redone. And as I said, if it really looks bad and I can't get it to work, just respray it and repaint it and start over. Let's see if I can do better here. Okay. It's not too bad. I needed to sigh. Sometimes it helps. My excuse is that it's eliminating excess carbon dioxide or something, but I think it's just, I'm not really frustrated, but getting pretty close. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, there's a spot here. I mean, the whole thing just isn't even painted. So it kind of goes beyond aluminum touch-up to aluminum painting right along the edge there, right along the edge of this thing that is getting painted black, is the need for aluminum paint original coverage, like coverage at all. Otherwise, it's not too bad. Get the other side. Clean this off first. Well, I mean, she definitely wouldn't do that. And if you make a child that isn't going to age, that kind of misses the point of having a child, which is the whole growing up bit. Then it's just like having a doll, which is not. I can't imagine that would be something she would be satisfied with or would even be able to tolerate. Sorry, I just here it is late in the stream and I'm trying to do stuff that requires not what I just did. Yeah, I could almost see that. I could feel that coming. The brush was just not going where I wanted it. I think I should be able to salvage that with the aluminum paint. It might take a couple coats, but it does. Okay, that went okay. If you can't see what I'm doing, I apologize. I can't turn it any other way. So on Wednesday, I'll be doing some touching up around these edges, and on the upper control arm, the upper suspension arm as well, where I was trying to paint the brake lines. Well, this is taking a while. I find that putting these tiny little dots of paint on just end up taking so much time. I could end up, I could paint half of a house in the time it takes to paint a spot. Apologize to Armand for not attending to the dialogue on chat right now. Hi, Enforcer. Oh, no, you didn't mention that you'd gotten a job. Really? And there's job drama? We just barely started and you're already getting into job drama? That's unfortunate. I'm getting into painting trauma. It's very nice that they printed this detail into the part. It's not so great. I need to paint it. Oh no. They said terrific. So you get started and you already got some issues going on. I'm sad to hear that. Hopefully that's something that could be worked out. Are you just waiting for them to call you back now? Oh my. Yeah. Sometimes, HR can be a little surprising. At the place I worked, we worked really hard for HR to not be, the scary place where only bad things happened, but actually to be, a place that was helpful to people who were struggling in their jobs or didn't understand their pay or benefits or the rules. At least we tried. Other times in other places, sometimes it's just full of mean people who do mean things. Let's see what's going on. This is about 90% okay and about 10% not. But I think I should be able to salvage it and make it look okay without without too much difficulty on Wednesday. I hope so anyway. Oh no. Oh my. Okay. Yeah. So instead of providing accommodation and just saying, okay, here's accommodation, they're making you jump through all sorts of hoops to prove that you need accommodation, which means that they don't really want to do it. Yeah. I mean, there are different ways of handling that kind of thing. One is you just say, okay, here's a person who needs accommodation. Let's do it. The other way is to say, not our problem. You haven't proven anything. You need to prove you need what you want. So you're going through that, you know, and then they make you do those things, and you get. I'm just going to share your concern there. Is you get adversarial, right? You end up fighting with each other, which even if it works out in the end, everybody's grumpy about it. And you don't need that. That doesn't help things in the long run. As opposed to just, let's handle this in a friendly and cooperative fashion to begin with. What's so hard about that? Well, I'm sorry you're going through that. I mean, it was probably pretty exciting, you know, to finally get a job, to land one, get started on it, and then to have it go sour so quickly. Sorry about that. Hopefully it will actually work out okay. Maybe, you know, and sometimes you'll find this out that, you know, the frontline supervisor is trying to throw their weight around a little bit and prove how bossy they are. And then you get to like corporate or HR, and it's just like, oh, this is how we're going to handle this. Is there a shiny spot there? So I hope that's the case for you. That when you finally get to HR or corporate, that you'll get people who are, oh yeah, we've dealt with this sort of thing before. This is how we handle it. No big deal. You'll let your supervisor know what they need to do. Okay, well, this is mostly okay. It just needs tiny little spots of touching up here, there, and yon. Bracket, just, I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's just not quite right. Yeah, I'm not quite getting the paint. Okay. Good luck with that. Good luck with your call. And I'll see you again on Wednesday. You can let me know how it goes, okay? Let us all know how it goes. I hope it goes okay when you make that call. But have a good lunch anyway. It's important to stay fed. The bristles. Not getting paint on the brush. Yeah, it's tiny little bits of painting. What was this doing? Taking me like a half hour? Okay, well, it's to the point now where I need to leave it. The edges are just a tiny bit ragged. So I'm hoping that the aluminum paint will cover. Yeah, I got wild paint attacks on my pants. That was messy, wasn't it? Okay, I am not going to try to touch up the aluminum paint today because it's just too late in the stream and it would go badly. But I will attempt to do that on Wednesday, probably early on. Early on, I'll be touching the aluminum on the brake lines here where they got all ragged, and on the instruments that are on the inside of this where they're just a little bit ragged as well. And hopefully it will look okay. I hope I can do that. The steering wheel, I think the steering wheel here. Let me get my box of stuff out here. Clean that brush a little bit later. So this is the boxo parts. This part is okay. This part is okay. So part of what I'm going to be doing with the parts on Wednesday is test fitting them. This needs touching up paint. Leave the toothpick in there because it needs touching up. This one's okay. So this needs touching up. This needs touching up. If I put these parts in here appropriately, I'll be able to get this in here also. And I need to start working on the instrument panels. So Wednesday, I'll be doing aluminum paint touch-up, start to work on the instrument panel, this side of it, okay? And test fit the suspension parts together to make sure that they all go together before I make any effort at all to try to do cementing assembly, okay? So I'll just leave. Oh, yeah, I can take this off. I'm okay with how the steering wheel came out. I think that came out okay. Excuse me. So I'll just leave this here so you can see that there are parts that are done. Take these alligator clips and put them in the alligator clip container. And then I'll clean this brush so that it will be ready for aluminum paint on Wednesday. I'll be trying to keep the little dots of aluminum paint to a minimum so that they blend in as well as they can to the rest of it. Well, I have to say that, painting the black detail this late in the stream was probably a mistake. It doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's not awful, but it's not terrific either. I want to make sure I get all the black paint out of here, because if I use this brush with the aluminum and there's black paint in it, the black paint will dissolve in the aluminum and it will discolor it. And I do not want it to be discolored because then it will look not good. I could say a bad word there. It would look crummy. Ooh, that's a good PG word, crummy. I'm going to go PG-13 and say crappy. It could look crappy. It's for trying to keep the stream, appropriate for those under 7 and over 70, which we always claim to be the demographic for a D&D show. Okay, I think that's good. Well, I'm going to start wrapping up here. I'll let you keep looking at these parts before I close up the box so that you can see that stuff has been done today. I painted aluminum, so I'm going to take the painting aluminium off the description for Friday and replace it with detail painting and part prep. I don't know if I remember that or not, but that's what I'm intending to do. On Wednesday is touch up the detail that I tried to do with the flat black paint, and test fit parts to make sure that they fit. Like does the steering wheel fit on the steering column, which I could do, but I'm not going to until then. It would be nice if it did. And then I'm going to start painting the detail on the instrument panel. And I will then also be pulling parts out of the parts box, which is there. This is the box of parts that I haven't been working on yet. I'll be pulling some of those out and getting them ready to be primed and painted. Like I might do something like this out of order, out of order of this. I'll start pulling out these rear suspension parts and maybe the injection ram tubes, the velocity stacks. You can't see any of this. Great. Nice going, camera guy. Yeah, I'll just keep pulling parts out and getting them prepped so that I can begin some assembly work on them. Oh, yeah. Duh. After I touch up the aluminum, I need to tape off all the aluminum parts so I can spray paint it green. I'm going to be like putting this together and go, something is wrong here. What's wrong? And then I'll suddenly realize that what's wrong is that I haven't painted it the body color yet. And maybe I'm going to have to keep trying to remember that incredibly obvious thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you'll. That's why I think you need to write a story about it, so that you can write a whole chapter about about her reaction to finding out what her true nature is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, eventually. With the little parts. Eventually I will. You can see stuff is happening. It's not like nothing is happening at all. Stuff is sort of happening, and there's parts. And in the next week, maybe later this week, actually start seeing some parts coming together. Can't promise that, but it may be. The painting is almost done. Yeah. So on Wednesday, what I hope to accomplish is finish the detailing of the, touching up the. Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting, but he hasn't said, of course, what it is yet. Touching up the black, the flat black that I tried to paint, trying to make it look okay. Making a decision about whether it is looking okay or not. And if it is, then this will get taped and then spray painted probably Thursday. So on Friday, you'll see it green. You'll see green. And then I can begin putting, after I tested all this, putting some of the assembly together. That's the thought anyway. Okay. Well, let's see, you've got a session tomorrow, right? So I hope you have a good session, a good play session. I want to invite everybody who has watched this in any way, shape, or form, or listened to it, to check in on our Dungeons and Dragons show. Dyson Dungeons puts on an amazing D&D show. Streams with live chat on most Sundays, like it just did this last Sunday. But you can catch all of the old ones on YouTube. You get to know our characters. You find out just how much fun we are to watch and listen to. And yeah, do that. Become a follower, become a subscriber. Oh, yeah. Maybe you'll be lucky. If it'll be ready, you might be able to pick it up tomorrow. And if you want to, you can go to patreon.com/Dyson Dungeons and become a patron and help support this and, more importantly, our D&D show. So thanks, everybody. I'll be back again on Wednesday at more or less 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, where we'll continue to make slow but steady progress, fairly steady progress in the assembly of the Lotus-Ford that won the 1965 Indianapolis 500. Thanks again. Yeah, that's always in the way, but what can you do? My director and camera person are just not very good at doing this. That is to say, me. But I think most of everything today was on camera, which is not always what happens. Thanks again. I'm going to stop battling. I'm going to say, see you on Wednesday. Everybody have a good day between now and then. Bye.